Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. On the phone right now, the senior senator for the great state of Texas, Senator John Cornyn. Senator, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Chad. Thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely, anytime. We've got, obviously, there's never a dull moment in Washington, D.C.
True.
There's always something going on. We'll start off with the current negotiations on border security and a border wall. This morning, the president saying that Republicans are wasting time, that it's a waste of time because Democrats basically are never going to agree to a border wall. Do you see the current negotiations as a waste of time? Do you think there's
the president may be right, but this is really our job. That's what Congress's job is to take up and pass appropriations bills that fund the government. And, of course, the president's an essential piece of that because, of course, he has to sign that bill for it to become law. But I hope the president's wrong. He may be right. But I still think it's important for Congress to do our job and to try to come up with a negotiated outcome here.
I'll be honest with you. I was a little bit disappointed that we don't have anyone, at least it seems to me, who's a part of these negotiations, part of this, I guess, this commission, this bipartisan commission talking to each other. Is there anyone representing the U.S.-Mexico border on this commission, Senator?
Well, we have two Texans on the House part of the conference committee. It's Kay Granger from Fort Worth and Henry Cuellar from Laredo. And I've worked with Henry a number of times on border and trade issues. He's a constructive person. He's what I would call one of the last remaining blue dog Democrats in the House of Representatives. So we've been talking for weeks now about ideas how to get out of this impasse. And I'm hopeful that through these kind of back channel communications that these ideas will be presented for the conference committee and that they actually will be part of the solution.
Do you think there is a chance Democrats will budge on a wall right now?
Well, I do, and some of this is just semantics because back in 2006 and again in 2008, Democrats and Republicans voted for the Secure Fence Act, which provided up to 700 miles worth of fencing along the border. Now, the president talks about a wall, and other times he talks about a fence. What we're really talking about is a physical barrier, which the Border Patrol say they need in addition to technology and personnel, and that depending on the location along the border, that's always going to be some combination of those three elements. So I think if we get Ms. Pelosi out of the discussion, at least initially, that these members of the conference committee can come up with a solution that will hopefully get us back to where we used to be, where border security was not a partisan issue.
Visiting with Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show. If there's not an agreement, there's a possibility that the government could be shut down once again, I believe, after February 15th.
Right.
That is the deadline. I know that you've always been very hesitant about government shutdowns. You want business to get done, not to shut down the government. Do you think Republicans would support, and would you yourself support, another government shutdown if Democrats refuse to play ball and refuse to build a fence, barrier, wall, whatever we want to call it? If the president says, let's do another shutdown, would you be in support of that?
Well, the problem with shutdowns is there are a lot of unintended consequences and a lot of people who become collateral damage to that whole process. And you're right, I have been reluctant to support shutdowns because I think that's why I got elected and members of Congress get elected. It's to govern and to sort through these problems and to work them out. We actually do it on a daily basis around here, but obviously not most of these aren't in the news or because they're not particularly controversial and because we're solving problems. But this is really not about solving the problem. At least it hasn't been, the previous shutdown. It was about Ms. Pelosi trying to teach President Trump who's boss. And that was unfortunate because it was all about politics and point scoring. And The president has a few other things up his sleeve he could do that would not result in a shutdown, but would still allow the border security measures to be undertaken. But I hope we sort of de-escalate the rhetoric and the fight and just work through this like we're supposed to do and provide for border security for the safety of our country.
Visiting with Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show. There's a story on the website thehill.com today, Senator, with the headline, GOP poised to rebuke Trump. And this is what they say. Frustrated Republicans say it's time for the Senate to reclaim more power over foreign policy and are planning to move a measure Thursday that would be a stunning rebuke to a president on their own party. One, have you seen this story? And two, what are we talking about here?
Well, I have seen the story, and it's unfortunately part of the press corps here in Washington D.C. They view this all in terms of personalities: who wins, who loses. Same thing over the Pelosi-Schumer shutdown fight with President Trump over border security. This is about Congress accepting our role as a co-equal branch of government and working with the administration on our foreign policy. Obviously, the president, by virtue of the fact he's head of the executive branch and he has the constitutional authority to lead the country as commander-in-chief, but Congress is not irrelevant. And what we hope to do is to work with the president and to inform our nation's foreign policy in a way that protects American interests. That's what this is about. This is not about trying to rebuke the president or to make him look bad. That's just a bunch of unnecessary rhetoric.
Senator, you and others have been working on health care, obviously, and with that, prescription drug prices. Tell us about that process and what you're working on right now.
Well, we had a very important hearing in the Senate Finance Committee on drug pricing, and I'll give you one example. For example, we had a witness talk about the price of insulin to treat her son's type 1 diabetes. He was born without the ability of his pancreas to generate insulin to deal with his blood sugar, and it was dangerous to his health and well-being. But because of the price of insulin has a copay of almost $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year, even though it's been on the market for perhaps as long as 100 years. The drug price is through the roof, and so her son began a course of self-rationing, which became a danger to his health. And as you know, diabetes is a terrible disease. It can lead to blindness. It can lead to loss of kidney function and ultimately to death. And insulin is very important. And about 3 million Texans have diabetes of some kind. So what we need to do is try to find some way to bring down that cost. And unfortunately, our healthcare system is very inefficient, a combination of insurance companies, pharmacy benefit managers, and the pharmaceutical companies dealing with each other in a non-transparent sort of way. So we need to pull the curtain back from all these transactions and find out how we can bring down prescription drug costs, including that for insulin for Texans suffering from diabetes.
Visiting with Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show. Senator, a story making news here in the state. Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush pretty upset with Washington, D.C. right now, saying that about $4.3 billion in Harvey funds meant to make its way to Texas has been held up by the federal government, and it's about 1 year now since Congress, set aside those funds. They haven't made their way to Texas. What's going on?
Well, Commissioner Bush is right, and so is Governor Abbott, who I've talked to numerous times. I've written to the White House and talked to the White House about releasing these funds. There's a Office of Budget and Management that has essentially usurped the role of Congress when it comes to appropriating money to the state for disaster relief. We were, I think it's fair to say, enormously successful working with the administration, working with Congress to get a substantial amount of money for the victims of Hurricane Harvey in Texas. But the Office of Management and Budget, an arm of the administration, is holding that money, slowing it down. And we continue to push on them as hard as we know how. And I'm afraid this fight is just going to continue to escalate. And in the end, I think if the administration is not careful, what I think could be viewed rightly as a very generous way to deal with the victims of Hurricane Harvey is going to be soured by this story of them holding up the money that should go to the victims.
Senator, I know you have to go here in just a little bit. I think I heard a siren going off in the background. but real quick, I just want to ask you this. There are stories about you and other Republican officials being concerned about Texas staying red in 2020. How concerned are you about that?
I'm very concerned. We saw last time I ran, for example, in 2014, we had 4.7 million people vote. In the 2018 election, it was 8.3 million. It was a huge turnout. And, of course, we've had a lot of changes in our state, a lot of people moving here from other states. And to be honest, I think Republicans have gotten a little bit complacent. And we need to up our game. And since I'm on the ballot with the president and all of our congressional delegation and all of our Texas State House delegation, I'm going to take it upon myself the responsibility of trying to up our game and keep Texas red. But it's going to take a lot of work and unfortunately a lot of resources to do that. But that's my commitment.
Very good, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that quite a bit with you, Senator Cornyn. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We'll let you go before that siren goes off again. Okay.
Thank you, Chad. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. That's U.S. Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show.